Welcome back to the Eric Krown crypto channel, wishing you a happy nearly start to this nice macro Sunday morning over here, as we're going to be focusing on some very, very high term time frame charts, putting the puzzle piece together for the long term. And it's actually what is most likely thing to be happening in the more proximal time. We're talking about the next couple months, and then that obviously bleeds into and leads into the rest of the year. Anyways, other than that, I want to be once again, yes, giving the highlight to the Bybit promotion that's going on. They got 0% on maker fees for derivative contract orders if you use the link in the description below. You can also even get the Jewel Light for free for the first 30 days if you follow the directions there too. All right, sweet. Let's just jump right into it. Starting off right in over here with the old rainbow chart. That's right. It's rainbow time, and Bitcoin over the full history, as you can see, has actually had a nice interplay between the timing of when the halving starts, or when the halving is, I guess, is not necessarily when it starts, and how things progress as far as time goes from that particular pivot. And as you can see here, there's been obviously several cycles now in the past, and typically speaking, once you get quite mature within this blue region, which is about 1 year away, by the way, from the actual halving date, that typically is when Bitcoin is going through its transitionary time. So I would say that it's neither bullish nor bearish. It is boorish more than anything. A lot of sideways going on right here, obviously. So I do still remain with the overall analysis that we've been stating on this channel for it's got to be like 6 to 8 months now, that the lows very, very likely in, and not just a major low, but probably a macro low, and likely Bitcoin going to be entering into a long-term sideways period. Sideways in this case can be, anywhere up to $40,000 and anywhere as low as, high teens, low 20s, basically. But I do expect that Bitcoin's basically going to be playing out a long-term consolidation between these regions, probably for the next year to come, as you probably do see over here, maybe even a little bit longer than that as well. Moving on now, as you can see, we can move into the MVRV chart over here. This is another one that we've been following as far as a fundamental chart that, historically speaking, has been a pretty good indication as to when Bitcoin is putting in major highs and major lows. And as you can see, coming off of the low side right here, whenever we see the MVRV get into the green zone and then get its first tick, or consecutive ticks, I should say, like a couple consecutive ticks outside of the green zone after getting into it, like right here, as you can see, that typically indicates that Bitcoin is ready to really be getting into that transitionary period where the next move is actually typically up, obviously, because, all before that was mostly down. And of course, all of these green vertical bars represent the areas from when that point occurs. And as you can see on the chart here, you can see that, these pivots typically happen, not typically, they all happened after the actual macro low was in for that particular cycle. And Bitcoin was getting ready to actually put in the next sort of move to the upside in these cases. You can see one right here. You can see one right here, obviously, right here, and perhaps right here. It did happen here, as we identified a couple months ago now, but I wanted to follow up on this one because it is following through. And now we're getting a lot of consecutive closures above the top side of that green zone. Now, I want to take this one step further and talk about something that we haven't spoken about, I don't even think once on this channel, which is these two moving averages that are on this chart. That is the cyan one right here is a 9 exponential, and the green is a 55 exponential. And the reason why I have them on the chart is because it's been a generally good indication in alignment with that MVRV setup for, looking for pressure on from like a timing perspective to the upside, coming after that last major downside move. So I think this is the best example right here. Obviously, you can see the MVRV, boom, we get the cross right here, follows through, big move to the upside, and again, this was in the grand scheme of things, this was not the move, and things did basically go sideways for all the way about 2 years basically from that point. Until Bitcoin really actually went on a major run after that, putting in new highs, obviously. Same thing over here, right? MVRV, boom, you got the cross right here, upwards and onwards. The cross actually in that case happened a little bit before, but that's okay. There's not it doesn't necessarily have to be one way or the other. In this case, again, right here, MVRV setup, then we get the cross right here, boom, major move to the upside. Same thing over here, we get the MVRV, we get the cross right here a little bit later, sideways and up. You can see, so on and so forth. You get the idea now. And what's relevant about this close that we're actually going to be seeing this one cross to the upside for the first time since basically a little bit more than a year ago now is when they actually started to cross to the downside. That would be February 2022, and that would be confirmed barring any sort of humongously nasty dump by end of day in the next 18 hours, 10 minutes, and 21 seconds. So assuming that Bitcoin basically, especially doesn't like crash back down below like $26,000 intraday here, probably going to see that happen. And again, long term, the probabilities continue to be stacking up in favor of at least one more push to the upside, like a legitimate push to the upside, if you will. Anyways, moving on now, we can start to combine this with technicals and statistics. And over here, we can once again bring back the volatility versus stochastic momentum chart, of which volatility is now officially in the fully contracted zone, or at least the where I start to define it as extreme contraction. This is on the daily right here. You can see it's below 10 percentile. It's actually, in fact, at 7.5 percentile right now, comparable to several of the last major events that we have seen. Anyways, the reason why this is relevant is because anytime that we have seen extremely contracted volatility, the expansion phase that naturally happens after that has led to an average move, as we'll go over, of about 20% over the course of, from that validation, about 10 days or so, as we'll go over. But it is the direction of the stochastic oscillator that has had a very high correlation to the direction of the volatility expansion. So in this case, you can see that the daily stochastic is still angled to the downside, right? Maybe. Well, let's see where the current pivot is. It is coming down now significantly. Just a few days ago, this was well above 28,500, and I think a week before that it was about 29,000 bucks. So you can see on the daily right here that, again, as we've been saying for the past week now, that the longer that Bitcoin goes sideways here, the more and more likely that it is that this is going to be a bullish reset, and you're very likely to see the next move to the upside. So in this case, you can see that the new pivot again is 28,100, meaning that the daily stochastic will turn up if Bitcoin closes above there today. And if we go and reference these statistics over here, we can actually go ahead and backtest all of the prior examples with that particular setup over the past, I believe this is 5 years right here. And of the past 5 years, there was 14 of those setups. Of those 14 setups, the direction of the stochastic oscillator was correct in getting the direction of the volatility expansion 12 out of 14 times. So very high hit rate right there at just under 86%, as you can see. Typically over the course of an average of about 9 to 10 days with a standard deviation of about 3. So, we're looking somewhere around like half a week to a week, basically, most likely from the validation of volatility expansion, which volatility expansion would need to be obviously the BBWP, getting back above the 10 percentile, back above the moving average, hopefully both of them having a positive slope as well. But of course, people look at these setups in many different ways, or not at all, to be fair as well. And that is a decision for you to be making. Some people like to front run them, some people like to wait for full confirmation. For me, I actually don't play them all. I play mostly short-term time frames, but I do think that this is interesting just for, long-term direction. Anyways, as far as the average return goes for the upside setups, it was, just over 20% with a standard deviation of about 5.5. So, the overall range would be like 15% to 25% with the average at 20. And again, that is in the case of upside. Now, I do want to state that if we go over to the short side setups, because again, remember, this is not confirmed yet. So while right now, we could very easily see this flip to the upside, of which then the probabilities would once again be, a lot more inclusive of upside, if you will, or a lot more, signaling that the upside is a lot more likely. Currently speaking, it's actually still to the downside. Or actually, no, it did cross the upside yesterday, but it's kind of meaningless right now. It's a pretty weak one, at least thus far. But if Bitcoin were to close basically here, it's $60 below, so it remains to the downside, then the downside would, still be more likely. In this case, out of the past 5 years, there's been 20 tested iterations, and 14 of those 20 did play out in the downside fashion when the stochastic was angled to the downside. So about a 70% strike rate, still pretty damn high. Not as high as the upside, obviously, but still pretty damn high. Taking an average of just under 11 days, and the average return was about 20%. So very, very similar, actually, with more variance in the standard deviation. But again, comparing these two together, we're probably looking at, if Bitcoin goes to the upside, we're probably looking at like a 20-ish, 15 to 20% move, I'd say, is quite likely from this base right here. Well, that would put Bitcoin at about $32,000. on the lower end and about 33.5 to 34 on the upper end. And if we go to the downside, well, what does 15% look like off the current highs? Yeah, $24,500 or so. I still remain with what I've been saying for the past week now, in the sense that, again, the longer that Bitcoin goes sideways here without breaking down, and when I say breakdown, either I want to see the volatility setup start to fire off, or I want to see Bitcoin, start to close dailies below realistically like $27,000. And at that point, yeah, the downside is extremely likely. But in this case, the longer that Bitcoin just chugs along going sideways here without breaking down, the more and more likely, again, this will just naturally reset, boo laws take over, and Bitcoin gets its next drive to the upside into the low, maybe even mid $30,000 territory. Also on that topic, we can once again revisit this chart. This one goes kind of hand in hand with the MVRV chart. Or actually more importantly, the rainbow chart over here, which, by the way, you better fucking like on Twitter, because you know what? I made a tweet about it today. It's the Bitcoin inclusivity chart. And if you don't like it, you will be reported to Musk. Anyways, back on track over here. What I've done on this particular chart is I have marked off all of the prior halvings in Bitcoin's history by these green vertical bars. So that'd be this one, this one, this one, this one. Or, this one over here is estimated, but basically about a year from now, we're probably going to be seeing a halving in 2024. And then I found that there's an interesting relationship between the time when Bitcoin kind of broke out of its prior mega downtrend, in relationship to when the halving actually is, and found that, as you can see here, big move to the upside, boom, breaks it right here. That was 52 bars or 52 weeks, because this is a weekly chart, which is 1 year before the halving date. And of course, once it broke above there, low was in, next major move to the upside, so on and so forth. Should also denote, however, that while this next major move was to the upside, then the move after that was a big move to the downside. When we're talking about big move to the downside, it doesn't look like much on this chart, but that's a 50% fucking move. Kind of a big deal. Same thing over here, or similar thing over here. 54 bars, 54 weeks before the halving date, Bitcoin breaks out of that long-term downtrend, big move to the upside, big crash to the downside after that. Big crash to the downside. Moving on to the next one, the most recent one in 2018. Same thing, breaks a bus on through that one right here. Has a major move to the upside again. And then, that was the Rona dump after that. So another 40 to 50% to the downside. Anyways, more recently, or I guess, relatively speaking, Bitcoin did break that downtrend in about January. And what do you know? We're about 66 bars away from the halving right now. So there seems to be some sort of a increasing relationship right here between, the halving date and that breakout. This one, again, 52 bars, 54 bars, 58 bars, 66 bars, 2, 4, 8. Interesting. And if we actually go ahead and measure the first major move to the upside. So when I'm talking about that first major move to the upside, what I mean is whoops, wrong chart, this one, like this one right here would be a good example. So, boom, breaks out. Okay, there to next high, big move, right? All right, so I measured that out and found over the past 3 iterations, which ain't much, honestly, but it's the best that we can do with the information that we do have. And there does seem to be some, some crossover between them. We found that, on average, the percentage gain on that first major move was about 140%. You can see, all of the iterations right here, 155, 102, 167, so kind of close to each other. And the time that it took on average for that next major high was about 100 days. This one had more variance, obviously. So, if we're just taking the averages at face value, which is probably not wise, it'd be like 100% move plus, which I think is like, that's, to me, that this does not feel right to say, because it's just too much over the course of an average about 100 days, which actually seems a lot more reasonable to me, which is, about a third of a year, basically. So if we go back on over here, we can start to measure these out from those points. So in this case, where exactly was this? Well, 100% puts you actually in the like mid to low $40,000 territory. 150% puts you way higher than I will even say on video here. But looking at 100 days out from that point, where would that essentially suggest that, if we are going to see a major run like that, where would it probably happen by? Well, we've already seen. Yeah, we're working on day number 70 right now, it looks like, or maybe I have that one off, but very, very close to it. 100 days out puts you into like early May, which is very interesting because May is, seasonally speaking, one of those months where things just tend to go down. Similar to October, it's September. Yeah, it's actually September. But what's very interesting about that is it kind of lines up with all these past ones as well. What do I mean by that? Well, you get that first major move to the upside and then crash after that, basically, of which I've actually measured that out as well and found that on average, the next major move to the downside after that first busting action to the upside was about 40% or above 40%. We have 37.5, 40, and 50, 52 basically, over the course of about 3 months, 91 days right there on average. So again, coming back into it right here, it's like, does Bitcoin rally into maybe May or June and then come down hard from, I don't know, let's say like, I like personally speaking, I think max hopium would be like $40,000, somewhere around there. Does Bitcoin then come down like 40% after that? I think that would actually be very, very reasonable. That would put Bitcoin back around $25,000. And that would also be a higher low as well compared to the overall macro low right here, something like this. So I do still think that is, in the cards, something similar to that. I don't know how high Bitcoin will get on this particular drive over the next month and a half, basically. I think low 30s is, I think, quite reasonable. Upper 30s, okay, getting a little bit out there. 40s, all right, that's enough. 50 plus, that's where I'm just like, I think something else is happening. But after that, probably in the summer, looking at the summer here, probably gonna be some big down months, some very, very big down months. Maybe even coming all the way back down to the mid, maybe even low $20,000 territory, depending upon how high this current move gets. But for right now, things do still suggest, it looks like to me, that next move to the upside is a little bit more likely than not. That's on the very high term timeframes. Obviously, if we go to the lower term timeframes, the ranges are basically the same here. I mean, even looking at the 12-hour HPDR ranges, $27,000. I'd be looking at this one to come back down to 25 from here. That would kind of be like my trappy-ish area. Or if you want to be like super, you buy the book, then I guess looking at the daily, it's about 26.7 for that particular number. By the same token, to the upside, just really want to see, even 12-hour closures above about 28.5, 28.6 region. Likely be getting the next major move into the $30,000 territory. But for right now, in the very low term timeframes, we haven't really spoken about anything on this particular video, and I don't really plan to, honestly. It looks like we might see a little bit more on this pullback here. But yeah, other than that, I want to be wishing you the best as always. Take care, much love, and see you hopefully soon.